Being ripped limb from limb is not an image most of us want to dwell on, but it was something the ancient Romans It was one of their most cruelest and most terrifying punishments reserved for traitors, deserters, or rebellious slaves, and they made sure that the process was excruciatingly slow and painfully public. Why did they want to publicly display such brutality? And how widespread was this practice in ancient Rome? We're about to embark on a journey back in time to explore these questions and more. Our goal is to shed light on one of the darkest chapters in history and uncover the disturbing details surrounding the dehumanizing practice of death by dismemberment. It was a punishment that was reserved for the most heinous of crimes, those who betrayed Rome or defied its authority. Rome was a highly stratified society with a rigid hierarchy that placed great emphasis on obedience and order. Deserters and traitors were seen as the ultimate betrayal and faced severe punishment. Death by dismemberment served as a reminder to the army and the people of Rome that disloyalty would be met with swift and brutal retribution. They might be crucified before being dismembered, or their bodies might be mutilated and displayed in public places as a warning to others. What makes this form of punishment truly horrifying is the fact that it was done intentionally, methodically, and in full view of the public. The Romans took great pleasure in humiliating their victims and making an example of them to deter others from engaging in similar behavior. The idea of punishing criminals in such a brutal manner was seen as a necessary evil to maintain order and protect the stability of the empire. As Christianity spread throughout the empire, it challenged the traditional Roman values of violence and spectacle. Why do we find pleasure in watching violence and death? Is it simply a manifestation of our darker instincts, a desire to dominate and control, or is there something more? A morbid fascination with the macabre that has always been a part of human nature. Perhaps it is a combination of both. Over time, the death by dismemberment and other forms of public torture became less common. Romans believed that it was better to have a few people suffer than to risk the chaos that could result from widespread lawlessness. Moreover, the spectacle of violence and death was an integral part of Roman culture. It was a spectacle, a warning, and a means of controlling the masses. It was a grim reminder of the lengths to which humans can go when faced with the challenge of maintaining order and power. Public executions and animal hunts were common forms of entertainment, and the death by dismemberment was simply an extension of this tradition. We hope that by shedding light on these horrifying practices, we have done our part to ensure that they are never repeated. Remember the lessons of the past and strive to create a better future. Stay tuned for more educational content that explores the most intriguing and thought-provoking aspects of human history. Together, we can continue to learn and grow from the mistakes of those who came before us. The public nature of the punishment was also an important element of its effectiveness. This psychological torture was intended to break the person's spirit and force them to confess any crimes they had committed or renounce any beliefs that were seen as subversive. They would hurl insults, make fun of the victim's appearance, and even encourage them to give up and accept their fate. It was a grotesque display of human cruelty and callousness that serves as a reminder of the dark side of human nature. The crowd, which often included family members of the condemned, would chant and cheer as the executioners carried out their gruesome task. The spectacle was meant to be as terrifying as possible, leaving the onlookers both entertained and terrified. In ancient Rome, spectacles of violence and death were a form of entertainment and a way to assert Roman values and power. The condemned were paraded through the streets before their execution to humiliate them and to send a message to the crowd. The sight of someone being torn limb from limb was meant to evoke terror and obedience in the hearts of onlookers. The ruling class, the patricians, held most of the wealth and power, while the lower classes, including the plebeians and slaves, had little voice in government. This inequality and lack of representation led to frequent unrest and rebellion, which the authorities sought to crush with an iron fist. Slaves, the lowest class in Roman society, were particularly vulnerable to this cruel punishment. If a slave was accused of a crime or simply displeased his master, he could be handed over to the authorities and face the dreaded death by dismemberment. Among Rome's many instruments of torture and death, few were as terrifying as the one known simply as the cat's paw, or the death by dismemberment. This horrific form of capital punishment typically involved tying the victim's limbs to 4 strong horses or soldiers who would then pull in opposite directions until the body was literally torn apart. Now, we have to pause here and take a moment to consider the sheer horror of this punishment. The actual practice of death by dismemberment varied somewhat depending on the status of the victim and the nature of their crime. For slaves and common criminals, the punishment might involve being tied to chariots or horses that would drag them through the streets. The horses would either gallop or be driven at a steady pace, causing the victim's body to be torn apart slowly and agonizingly. In other cases, the condemned might be suspended from a crane or an arching device that would lift them off the ground and expose their body to the full view of the spectators. Imagine being tied up, completely vulnerable and at the mercy of forces beyond your control. But they were also a ruthless and unforgiving people when it came to maintaining their power. Rome was built on conquest, and those who threatened its vast empire were dealt with swiftly and brutally. Citizens and non-citizens alike were subject to its draconian laws, and there was little room for mercy or second chances. Then picture your arms being pulled in one direction, your legs in another, and your torso. Well, let's not go there. It's a fate worse than death. A fate designed to humiliate, terrify, and break the will to rebel. But what exactly prompted the Romans to invent such a gruesome method of punishment? Our first stop on this journey takes us to the very heart of the Roman Empire. Ancient Rome was a city like no other, a bustling metropolis that was home to over 1 million people. It was a place where the old and the new, the East and the West, came together in a melting pot of cultures. But beneath its grandeur and opulence, Rome was also a city of contrasts, where life could be both exhilarating and terrifying. The Romans were known for their grand public works, their impressive infrastructure, and their commitment to spectacle. In this unforgiving environment, the death by dismemberment became one of the most feared punishments in the Roman world. To understand why the Romans resorted to such extreme measures, we must delve deeper into the socio-political landscape of the time. Rome was also a military powerhouse that relied on the unwavering loyalty of its citizens. Now let's get back to our gruesome journey through ancient Rome. For more prominent figures such as traitors or enemy soldiers, the execution might be even more elaborate and humiliating. During the execution, the victim would be subjected to prolonged periods of agony, interspersed with brief moments of respite. And as if the physical pain wasn't enough, the Romans added insult to injury by mocking the victim and denigrating them in front of the crowd. But despite the horrors of this practice, it was widely accepted and even celebrated by Roman citizens. It was only when the Roman Empire declined and fell that this barbaric practice gradually disappeared. As we conclude our exploration of this harrowing chapter in history, we are left with more questions than answers. One thing is certain, though: the death by dismemberment in ancient Rome was more than just a punishment. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the darkest depths of history.